It's really my pleasure and honor to host you for this curiosity-driven discussions and fun blog. I'm grateful for your time, and to be honest, I'm super excited to have an opportunity to talk with you. So I welcome you, Professor Sharma. Although you do not need any introduction to the scientific community in India, but let me do it for a wider audience. So I start with that you are currently secretary or heading the Department of Science and Technology in Government of India since January 2015, where you helped initiating several new programs in the areas of priority for the nation. You obtained BTech in Chemical Engineering from IIT Kanpur, Masters from Pennsylvania State University, and PhD from State University of New York at Buffalo. So, after this wonderful education, you came back to India to serve the country and joined as a professor, assistant professor initially in IIT Kanpur in the Department of Chemical Engineering, where you progressed as a professor, then an institute chair professor, and the head of Chemical Engineering Department, where you have also been founding coordinator of Nanosciences Center and Advanced Imaging Center. So there are a lot of things one can tell about you. So I would definitely add a link to your achievements. And but in short, I would like to say that Professor Sharma is one of the most influential persons in our country's scientific decision making. So it's a wonderful opportunity for myself to have discussion with you, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from you. And not only me, there are many others who are looking up to you and they are going to learn a lot from you. So I welcome you.
Thank you, Kriti, for holding this conversation. Um, let's keep it informal. Let us not, I don't foresee this conversation being very deeply scientific or technological, but
Yeah.
this is a Saturday afternoon, so let us talk some interesting things.
Yeah. So, the interesting things in the life of scientists or professors initially drives with curiosity. So, and my first curiosity is as a kid, what is your role as a secretary of DST? Like, what are your duties, your day-to-day life?
Yeah, day-to-day life is basically 9 to 9 and sometimes much later. But duties of a secretary in a department of the government of India, uh, in a general sense, are all the same. They are basically administrative duties, financial aspects, policy making aspects in Department of Science and Technology. It's about looking at different policies for science, technology, and innovation for the country. In fact, there's a new policy coming up now, which should be out in a couple of months on science, technology, and innovation 2021. We can talk more about it later if you wish. But the duties basically, you see, there are thousands, tens of thousands of scientific projects, all the way from atoms to astrophysics. There are many dozens of schemes and programs in different areas of science and technology that support research, that scout for research, that bring out ideas about what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, then competitively fund research in all areas. So this is the major task of Department of Science and Technology, is to stimulate research, development, technology development, innovation in the form of startups, all the way, and even supporting commercialization of indigenous technology. At the same time, creating the human resources at every level, starting even from BSc, MSc level to PhD to postdoc, to much beyond that to senior scientist. So supporting our science and scientists and scientific infrastructure in every possible form across the country and across the areas. The stakeholder base for Department of Science and Technology is very large. So often we think that science, well, is for scientists. But we must remember that science is not a vertical. Other words, it's not something that is in isolation with other things. It is actually a horizontal, which means that it cuts across every aspect, every sector, every aspect of life, every kind of activity, every institution, every ministry, industry, farmers, children, women, everybody. So therefore, science being an all-pervasive entity, you have to not only generate new knowledge in science, but also create mechanisms for consuming this knowledge. So Department of Science and Technology's role is to do both, is to create knowledge which is novel, which is required, which is relevant, which has direction, but at the same time also to see where this knowledge is going to be used and how it is going to be used. So these are basically, two different ecosystems in science that often, while they often may not work very well together, but they ought to work very well together for science to succeed as a whole. And these two ecosystems, the first one I call invention ecosystem, which creates new knowledge. The second one, actually, in a sense, is orthogonal to to invention, which is innovation. So innovation uses that knowledge which is created by invention. And we need both of them for society to be self-sustaining. So it is about self-sustainability of knowledge. We need resources to generate knowledge, and all those resources, whole lot of them are supported by the government, a whole lot of them are supported by Department of Science and Technology, together with other scientific ministries. The critical thing, a differentiating thing about DST is that it supports everybody except itself. So it's, I think, only department of the government which is not focused on oneself. Most ministries would have their own activities, their own institutions, their own everything, which they support. For example, CSIR would support their own labs. But DST, the mandate is to support everybody competitively and keeping in mind our needs and priorities in science and technology. So now, your question, what does secretary do? Um, Secretary, well, has to have some vision about these things. Where are the gap areas? What kind of schemes do we need? To give you an example, the last year we started a new scheme on cyber physical systems, which is basically artificial intelligence universe, not just algorithms, but also intelligent machines, whether you call them IoT, robotics, autonomous vehicles, Industry 4.0, all of those things basically is a machine material working with algorithms. And so future is all about convergence of technologies from communication to computing to sensing to action, which is autonomous. So this mission that we started worth rupees 4,000 crores. There's a new mission which is in offing, should be out in couple of months, which is a mission on quantum technologies and applications. So you have to be future ready. Now you talk about future. Of course, what does it mean to be future ready? It means, of course, all the way from human resources in that area, and what needs to be done, how it needs to be done. How it needs to be done is equally important, because often we fall short of our target because we have not thought about the mechanisms of delivery. We have thought about the objective, but not so much about how it is going to be done. So we pay attention to all of those aspects, bringing in new schemes as required, bringing in new support mechanisms, policies. In fact, even going, think about an innovation. Innovation has become a big mantra in last 5-7 years. To give you an example, DST supports about 140 technology business incubators across the country. These incubators, they have about 3,500 technology startups. All of them require support, they require mentorship, they require networking, they require business plans, they require a whole lot of things, fellowships and so on. So to think about like how innovation will take root deeper roots in the society, in the scientific ecosystem. To give you an example, when I was talking about mechanism of implementation, if you think about innovation, now innovation is not a singular event. It's not like invention. It's not like Eureka, say I found it. Now it is really hard work, and it is, I think of this as a chain rather than just one single link. That chain basically starts from R&D on one side. That R&D, that side of the chain is embedded in the knowledge ecosystem. Then you go through this chain, the other end of that is embedded in market realities. So a startup or innovation is really a twilight zone, if you would, between invention and innovation ecosystem. So it must have certain kind of character. It must have certain kind of support mechanisms, which are not be appropriate only for invention ecosystem when you just go and support a basic science research, for example, in a university. So it requires, to conclude very quickly, to strengthen this chain of innovation, it requires that we do mentorship, we do training, we do scouting, we do encourage people, we enhance their understanding even before they get into a startup. They need to have networking, they need to understand market realities, they need to understand their customer, they need to understand their know your customer, for example, KYC, know your market, know your product, right? All of that, not just having knowledge, because different kind of knowledge. All of that, then they may require prototyping facilities and support. So we provide up to 10 lakhs for that before they make a major plunge into having a startup. Then during the startup, they may need fellowship because they need to eat while they are now making money. At the same time, they need seed funding. So we found that every rupee of seed funding that we provided brought in additional 11.5 rupees of funding from the private sector. So it basically gives them early confidence that that this is something that they could do, they could remain floating, and then of course they require the exit plans. You're saying, okay, what are we going to do at the end of it all, right? Scale up. So going from startup to scale up is another valley of death, and we have to pay attention to that very, very closely. We don't have time because we are now focusing here only on startups, but all of this has to be taken care holistically, because remember, the strength of a chain is only as good as its weakest link. So we may have everything working very well, but there is something in between which is not working well. And this is where it's going to break. So these are some examples. And of course, DST is also the nodal for international agreements in science and technology. So we have cooperation with active cooperation with over 40 countries, MOUs and agreements with over 80 countries. And this is very vibrant because knowledge today is not localized in terms of political boundaries of a country. So it's a win-win situation. We make sure that we cooperate in such a way so that there is a good coming together of our need with their strength. If I were to, say it one mantra in just one line, the good international collaborations result when we pay attention to what is it that we need and what their strength is in order to supply that. And of course, similarly, I'm sure the other people would look for reciprocal, benefit to them. So therefore, it's a good partnership. It's a good partnership when both the sides actually gain. To give you an example, 2 years ago, we started a special cooperation with Israel with seeding $40 million or euro fund. Idea is that here we are now focusing on basic science research, which is a separate vertical, but here you are looking at two industries working together, one from Israel, one from India. They may also have academic partners if they like, but the focus is on co-developing technologies and products, which can have access to both the markets, and indeed through these two markets have access to other country markets. So this is an example of cooperation. So cooperation proceeds on many different tracks, maybe in basic sciences, in applied sciences, in technology, or even in industry now. So that's very heartening because we need really all of this working together.
Yeah, you have a success story which many people like to read about and hear about and all these things. But many times success is not what we really see. It's maybe having a milestone of some goof of stories or some mistakes. And would you like to share one of yours such goof of story which have been a lesson or something
Yeah.
influential?
So first of all, we must understand that there is no such thing as absolute success. And while we are aiming for success of some kind or other all the time, every success has some seeds of failure in it, and also vice versa. So often we emphasize that, look, just to encourage people, especially younger people, we say that the failure is not eternal. It is not forever. That is half the story. Success is also not eternal. It is not forever. So the so-called failure, of course, I don't much like the word because there's no such thing in absolute terms. So failure, it simply means, okay, I did something, I didn't quite get there, but I learned something maybe important in the process, which may lead to what I call now the success in a limited way. Right. So now you see success and failure, they alternate, very, sometimes in very quick successions, and so on. So now, I mean, my life, okay, I've never really examined it in terms of success or failure. It is in terms of making progress every day. Very important that we learn 2 or 3 new things every day. Like, for example, when I'm talking to you, Kriti, I'm sure there is something that comes from you which goes in my head, and I say, okay, something that I had not thought about earlier. So it is about living, which is living critically, which is living while being alive, in a sense, in terms of your perception, in terms of, what is it that you gain, uh, not being a little bit zombified, so to say. Now that happens very often in life because our psychological energy actually runs out. Say you become a little bit, we are thinking negative all the time. We are burdened by our experiences of failure and so on. And then it becomes very difficult to be totally alive about it.
Yeah.
So opportunities, for example, or success, sometimes there is just, is just little difference. There is an inch of door which is open. Now the question is, do you perceive that inch of door, that opening? So you can put a foot in there and make it open. So it is about perception followed by some action. Now, as far as, I mean, failure, I think you were asking me, okay, I
My
mean, everything I've done is a failure, and everything I've done is a success in some ways. Okay, so it's not, but I like to take risk. Now, I'll give you some examples. Now, you may consider it success or failure. First of all, I had decided that, okay, all the things that I have been trained in is not the things that I would pursue for my research. Also, because there is no new learning in that process. Now, if you want to grow in your head, then we must change your area of research every 7 years. It's called 7-year itch, but in a different context, right? So now that means that you are taking risk because, as we know, everybody protects their turf. They say, "Hey, who are you, chemical engineer? Why are you working in condensed matter physics? We don't know you, right? You got nothing to offer, right?" So there is resistance, but at the same time it's more fun, because your process of learning is accelerated by talking, by learning new things. So I give you this example. I could have failed when I started, let's say, working. When I joined IIT Kanpur, there was not great deal of research culture. There were no PhD students in engineering. You would not believe, department or 22 faculty members had 6 PhD students. For the first 10 years of my life, I worked on every problem myself, okay, with one PhD student at a time. So I don't know whether he was training me or I was training him. Either way, we were co-partners in working together, which was very enjoyable. And many people complain about it. They say, I can't work in this country. A lot of people, super bright people from top universities, they joined with me, but they became inactive because they said, no, no, they were comparing all the time. They were saying, I would like this, how can I do work? The, I don't have, support to do work. And anyway, my director is so evil and everything. All these things happen. But the whole point is that you cannot actually take these things seriously. Okay, you must decide what it is you want to do and push ahead with it. It's not by comparison that one does work. It is not by comparison at all, because by comparison you destroy what is best in both. When you compare A and B, you are focusing on their weaknesses. We must focus, I got strength, you got strength, I got my strength, I will work with that, right? And so what I did, because there were no labs, no, okay, so he said that I will do theoretical science. And then I started working on some thin films or something. I had a professor of physics, my neighbor, who was a famous physicist. He became director of many good institutes of physics in the country later. He was much older than me, but we would drink beer over weekends sometime and do some chatting. He asked me what I plan to do. I said, I plan to do this. He said, it sounds like physics. I had no idea about what physics is except physics 101 and 102. I did in my undergraduate years. But it seemed, anyway, I never thought about what I do is what is the label for it. Okay, it doesn't really matter. So I asked him, finally we did some work. I asked him, where do the physicists publish their papers? So he said that there is a journal called Physical Review Letters. He said that this is where people publish. At that time, there was no Nature Physics. So this was considered to be a good journal. Still is a good journal. So anyhow, because I had never heard about it, I was not intimidated by good journal, bad journal. We submit the paper there, it got accepted. Next 3 years, 4 5 years, I worked in that area. We published more than 12 papers in Physical Review Letters on that problem, which was more than the entire Department of Physics in that institute put together from the beginning. Okay.
Yep.
So now this is not, of course, we joke about it. They say you get lucky, whatever. Okay. Right. Either way, it didn't matter to me. I said, look, we did work for some fun. We wrote it up, we submitted. I'm never intimidated by, what happens, like, okay, he's a big scientist. It's perfectly okay. I respect people who are big scientists, small scientists, saints, sinners, everybody, but I'm not intimidated. Okay, so whether it is, people think, hey, his mind is so great, how can I talk to this person or be equal in a sense with him? I never had such problems. It is not, I do it consciously. I'm just built that way. Okay, so it's now I have irreverential attitude, whether it is a guru, whether it's a Nobel laureate, whether it is whatever it is, right? While we respect them for their expertise and their contributions, do not make the mistake of saying that you are less than them, because this confidence is very important in whatever it is that you do. Okay, this is not that one becomes proud. They are different things, right? It's not like you are thinking you are a great man. That would be an equal folly as to think somebody else is great. Okay, so they're not that. So that is how you learn. And so, like you said about, it could have been a major failure when I stepped into that. Later on, there was more, new missions from DST. There was more support available for new areas. So starting this millennium, this century, beginning of that, I started working in nano science and technology. Okay, so he set up all this stuff, which was okay. Then I became totally experimental. Okay, so over the years, let me tell you, a lot of people still do not know what is my background, that I'm a chemical engineer. So different times people thought I was a material scientist or a chemist or a physicist or of some variety or other. Okay, I don't know what. And I never dispelled any of their, misconcepts. I say, yeah, I have some background in this, that. I also worked in the late 80s. I was an adjunct faculty in biomedical, no, I mean school of medicine in Buffalo. So I was working actually problem of stem cells for cornea. So I learned surgery on rabbits. These were some of the good, very early papers on stem cells. You remember all the exciting areas started in early 80s. And at that time, people were, because of the corneal transplant, that problem as to stem cells, if you were to retain them in corneal transplant, has got a better chances of success. But people didn't know where these stem cells were located in cornea. So I was working on that problem, and I was very happy to publish some good papers there. Also doing surgery. That's one thing I've never enjoyed, killing these poor rabbits. And I got out of that area very quickly. But all I'm saying is, if I had thought about whether I would be successful doing it, I would have never done it. Okay. But I've never planned in my life about my career or said, look, this is how, by doing this, I will attain that. Okay. So I have not planned any of this ever as to what I want to become next. And then, I will tailor my work accordingly.
So my question was like, the leaders at top positions should tell the younger ones that mistakes are human and perfection is not. So this was somehow my thought behind it.
But actually, I would like to present the argument in a different way. What I would say is, everything which is there is perfection. So you cannot aim for it, because reality is not asking you for perfection. So people think that there is an ideal which is called perfection, and I'm not perfect, so I will reach that ideal. You will never reach it. Okay, so we often hear that best is the enemy of better. This is indeed true in a different way. Okay, so there'll never be any perfection as each of us thinks about it. A whole lot of our discussions and criticisms, they come from having an ideal of a perfection in mind, and then you compare it with the reality and you say, this is so, but the whole point is that none of these ideals that people, all the great Mahatmas and everybody has thought of all along these centuries and millennia, those are just daydreams. Okay, so it's the reality of life which is perfection. In fact, there's one of my favorite authors, is this Roman emperor. He was among the last Roman emperors, called Marcus Aurelius. So he was fighting a lot of battles, and he all his life in alien battlegrounds. And evening he would write these philosophical thoughts. It's a lot like Bhagavad Gita. So anyhow, so he says, look. He talks a lot about these kind of issues and aspects, and I think it's worth reading some of these good books, but not to be influenced by them. You see, there is a thing called, when I talk to some people, I get conditioned. When I read a book, not critically, not understanding it, then I get conditioned. We all get conditioned from the beginning, and this is a reason we are so fanatical, so that we see everything in black and white, and we see your religion, my religion. Then you see something else, applied research, basic research, all these, what do you call these, zero and one logical categories. So not like that. But I'm saying, look, I mean, he argued that your life is indeed perfect, and whatever you have actually is a good thing, because if you believe in God, then you cannot complain, right? Because if you think there is a God which is more wiser than you are, there is somebody running all of this stuff there, right? Then whatever you get actually is the right thing for you, and you cannot complain or question that wisdom. On the other hand, if you don't believe in God or whatever running this whole thing is by laws of nature, okay, and there's not very much, about to complain about this. They make some compelling arguments about not complaining. And all of this issue comes in because we think of perfection, and each one thinks of a perfection, his own heaven, right? And this own heaven, they are often in conflict with each other. So your heaven is in conflict with mine. So when my heaven is fulfilled, yours is not, right? And then you cannot have a personal heaven. You see, if your neighbor is not happy, you can never be happy. So there is no perfection. Indeed, what all that we can hope for is that we understand what it is that we are doing. why we are doing it, and then keep on doing it. Okay, so it is the perfection is in action. It is not in thinking or comparing something. Now, you may start comparing and say, look, my neighbor, he's so rich, and that guy is stupid. He doesn't know half as much as I do. I know a lot of people, especially academic people, who argue like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What does it mean? It means nothing. It's so absurd, right? Well, if you are jealous of riches, please go do that. Nobody stops you from becoming a businessman, right? Be my guest. If you don't find peace in a country, please be wherever you find peace. Okay, but don't complain. Okay, so there are only two ways. Either you cannot do better and then complain, right? Or like, okay, I'm not happy living in a country, but other country will not take me. Okay, so where is the complaint, right? There is no question of complaint. Or on the other hand, if I decide to live in this country, my choice, despite the fact that I could be somewhere else, then there is no complaint. Who are you going to complain about, right? So you have to make the best of what you got, that you chose, or the circumstances chose for you, that you couldn't do better than this, right? So there must be peace in either of these two situations. I mean, this is very logical. I'm putting it like so that people understand. Just not saying, look, how it should be, because that just becomes perfection. Okay. It's just logically, because we are scientists, so we are thinking loud. We are saying, look, how can I complain? Uh,
Yeah, talk.
Let me give you an example. So, this example of being personally satisfied in life. When I first joined, I was in US for about 8.5 years. My wife was there for about 4 or 5 years. So it was a big change, especially in 1990, 80s. The difference between here and somewhere else was very large. Okay, it was a step, process, so to say, both, culturally, in terms of technology, telephones, what have you, anything, cars. um, so for the first 3 years, at those days, if you wanted cooking gas, then you have to get in the line, and then you wait few years, or somebody influential, or you pay bribe. There were three ways to do it,
And I
right?
did not
We
pay.
got in the line. So we got in the line. We waited 3 years for cooking gas, but
Yeah.
we never complained. Okay, you cannot complain. This would be silly, right? And you can also feel holy that I'm making some sacrifice. You are doing no thing to anybody. Okay, this is your choice. You do it or you don't do it. If you're not happy, bribe and get it tomorrow, but don't complain. Okay, so but we were totally happy with that choice, because while you don't have 3 years cooking gas, we may had a microwave oven, and also a solar cooker, which was fantastic, beautiful food
Yeah,
being cooked.
yeah, nowadays it's not that popular, but I remember when I was
Uh,
a child, it was wonderful. Like, my mother would every day make porridge in the solar cooker, and boiled potatoes, and sometimes pulses, and and now I do not really see even a single solar cooker on any roof, and I think we need to develop that culture again, because in Rajasthan it's really fantastic. It's
it's
perfect.
not so much about culture, Kriti. It's about convenience that people want in life.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so there is a
fast.
greater, I mean, saying no, people think this is all useless. It will not add up to my scientific work. Therefore, it will not add up to my career progression. Therefore, it will not add up to my getting awards. So now, once you start judging life like that life becomes very distorted. It becomes very narrow, right? You have no time, because you think it's inconvenient. It takes more time and so on. So certain aspects of life, the beauty, the diversity of life, and so on, you totally miss it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm getting really good life lessons from an expert. Like while you were talking
I'm not an
about,
expert in life. I have some degrees in chemical
you
engineering. Yeah.
are an expert scientist, I would say so. And scientists are good philosophers, no doubt. So I would ask you, like you talked about the importance of that how you looked out of the box and how you used your curiosity and just like the learning capability to go into different areas of science, like also physics, biology, everything, nanosciences, and even advanced imaging. You did not leave a single topic almost, like in all the directions you spread your research. Yeah, this is one thing, but you did have a formal education in chemical engineering. And later on, you wanted to work on different topics. Since you had already a position, you got it. But nowadays, like our recruitment system in yeah, the state universities do need formal education in the same background, but that is still understandable because they are mainly running on teaching, and the research is quite less over there. But the national institutes like IITs and NITs, they are having a good scope for research. And there also, when we see the eligibility criteria in recruitments, it's highly oriented towards the formal education. Do you think that we need to make a change over there and think beyond the formal education? Sorry, you are muted.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. That's absolutely, 120%. And the reason is, let's understand actually where it came about from. You see, in the beginning, so to say, 100 years ago, there was very few differentiation in knowledge. Okay, then let's say starting from chemistry came industrial chemistry. From industrial chemistry, with the rise of certain kind of industries, came chemical engineering. Okay, it's not nothing which is written in stone. Now that these things kind of fossilized and formalized in the form of departments has a particular purpose. And that particular purpose is basically undergraduate teaching. So you need to teach certain kind of course so that certain kind of industry finds them employable according to their needs, right? So if you are doing petrochemical processing, for example, and stuff, then you teach those kind of courses in chemical engineering, right? And so it has a purpose, it has a meaning. Now, what often happens in everything that we do actually is that we take the original purpose and meaning and extrapolate it where it does not have meaning. Now, that extrapolation is in terms of good, novel, profound research. So while undergraduate teaching, it has perfect meaning, it does not have equal amount of meaning or much less meaning if we were to pursue the frontiers of research, which is why I have often argued that we need actually two parallel superimposed structures in academia. So one is the structure which is related to research. Now, for example, when you say, well, there's a center in, let's say, energy, this is not according to departments, right? So there would be people with chemical engineering background, chemistry, physics, material science, other things, right? Okay, maybe even biology, because there's certain kind of energy for living systems and so on. So that is what you see. Now we start calling all of that as interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and so on, right? To my mind, actually, in the context of research, the words interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary is a total misunderstanding. Why is it a misunderstanding? Because we first created disciplines, which, like I said, don't apply in the context of research. Then, because we created disciplines and we start taking them seriously for good quality research, then we have to, invent a new word, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. you know so if we don't have a concept of disciplines, I mean, we have concept of tools. Each discipline basically teaches you some tools of the trade. Now, to solve a problem, you require multiplicity of those tools, solve a real problem. So therefore, that becomes now a research domain, whether you call it energy, water, health, and subdivisions in there. Those are all by definition interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. So see, if our focus is on disciplines, then we will, in order to solve the problem, how do we overcome the weaknesses of disciplines or discipline-centric thinking? That is, to overcome that, then people have to invent these artificial words like multidisciplinary, right? So this is where historically it comes from. So now, of course, more of it is happening. If you were to look IITs, and so they create now even these new departments. There always been centers and programs in these kind of things, but now even departments which give undergraduate education energy, for example, is becoming popular. And that in a sense is truly multidisciplinary, that is not related to the historical ways in which we organize knowledge. Though there are two different ways you can organize knowledge. One is according to what we call disciplines, and these disciplines, now even chemistry, for example, it fragments into biochemistry, physical chemistry, organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, green chemistry, red chemistry, I don't know, many different physical chemistry, chemical physics, physical chemistry, whatever, right? So all of that is perfectly fine. And you see, this was like an intermediate solution to the problem of research. So he said, look, okay, just, what all can we define in terms of physical chemistry? But now look at the problem of energy. Let's say look at battery. Now there's not problem any longer only of physical chemistry. Materials are important, right? Even electronics are important. This is where a whole lot of scientists go wrong, right? I've done work on batteries and supercapacitors. Now I can see that the way we do this work is so incomplete. Yeah? And that's because a battery is not what we call battery. You see, it is also electronic packaging. It is also thermal management system. It is also power management system while charging and discharging. So all of that we totally ignore. And like I said, put some stuff on graphene and make one electrode, make half a cell in controlled condition in your glove box, and and say, and do all of these characterization. Anyway, it's going to give the same result as everything else. No breakthrough there. Okay. So now, so your point is, yes, I think this comes with understanding. Exactly what I just told you. The understanding is, look, there is a domain for undergraduate research, and for that we need certain kind of specified knowledge. Okay, so that these people are certified to be have done this knowledge and they can be employed in a certain sector. Okay, this is fine. Now, as far as doing good research, doing solving problems, by good research I mean solving problem. And a problem does not tell you whether it's a problem of biology, it's a problem of chemistry, physics, electronics, materials, what have you, right? Is got all of it, right? So to have a holistic solution for a problem obviously means that it has to be out of discipline or not discipline centric, not tool centric, right? It's a problem centric. So that to develop that mindset by understanding, deep understanding, and saying, look, we really have to look for brilliance in people, their problem solving abilities, not whether they can crack an exam in physical chemistry, right? If you gave me any exam today in chemical engineering, I would fail, and I'd be very happy to fail it. Okay, let me tell you a joke. So when I just joined, well, joke to me is a real thing. So there, one of my very senior people who was also my teacher earlier in undergraduate, so he would come around and tell me that what I was doing was not chemical engineering. He was right in that. So I would often tell him, I would say, I hope so, and so on. One day I just told him, hey, good friend, I'm friend with everybody. People may be 40 years my junior or 40 years my senior. Okay, I always call them by the first name. So I say, hey, such and such, I have done in 2 years what you did in 20. He said, what? I said, nothing. Okay, so finally, no matter what you do, okay, in some ways it is nothing, in some way it is something. Okay, but so yeah, I think being this why is problem solving so important, especially for the future. There are two things which are happening now which did not happen earlier. So earlier what happened was fragmentation of knowledge in order to serve the needs of particular kind of society, particular kind of industry. Now there's a greater push on the synthesis of that knowledge, back integration, if you would, because look at the challenges of the future, sustainable development. Now, it's not even problem only of technology or science. It is so not only integration has to happen across silos of science and technology, but also across the silos of humanities, social science, policy making, indeed our deep culture, indeed how our society is organized, indeed how each one of us individually responds to the challenges of sustainable development, right? So you see now what a poor engineer would do about solving this problem, no matter if he's a chemical engineer, is anybody, right? So it basically means an integration of our knowledge, not analysis. Our traditional approach to knowledge is based on analysis, deeper and deeper analysis, right? You take one aspect of something and then you beat it to death, if you would, right? To 10 decimal places, if you would. We are all very good at analysis. If you look at your school education and college, we can crack all of these exams because they are all based on analysis. Not one of them, not one course is based on synthesis, which means I give you a problem. Now you use your everything you learned in thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, chemistry, physics, materials. You use all of that to solve this problem, or even to understand what aspect of this problem is of what nature, of what is the tools I would need to solve this problem. That is what is synthesis, and that synthesis is totally missing. And in fact, that is true of also our fragmentation in life.
Yeah.
There's no synthesis, right? And so I totally agree with you that in the future we have to organize our organizations, our knowledge systems, our approach to all of this, hiring, firing, promotions, what have you, awards, rewards, all of that must take into account the reality, the new reality,
Yeah,
the
actually,
future challenges.
I thought it quite differently. Vince, the way you said that the person should have formal education because he or she needs to teach the undergraduates in that particular discipline. But the thing is, the person who wants to get appointed, he or she also has a vision like what she wants to teach, but she or he might have circumstances that she could not have gotten the formal education in that particular field. But if that person now has a deep interest in that particular field, then I have the feeling that our the recruitment criteria should not just kick them out from even from
Yeah,
looking up.
totally agree with you. And this is exactly what I said. I said in like different words, but I totally agree with you. In fact, I know many people who are very successful in US, for example,
Yeah.
where there are not many barriers, right? I know many people, somebody who did actually PhD, masters in physics, PhD in something, biophysics. Okay, I mean, they teach chemical engineering and they are among the better teachers. See, whole point you should remember is that teaching undergraduate, what it requires is actually your capacity to learn. Okay, and anybody who is brilliant in any area, I guarantee you, would be able to learn equally well anything at all. Let me also tell you, when I started teaching, even though I had done BTech in chemical engineering and I was teaching in the same department, when I had to start teaching, I had to relearn everything.
Yeah.
Okay, do not, we cannot, people have this very wrong concept that because you have done an undergraduate in something, that you have totally understood it and you have an advantage in teaching it. I would like to deny that completely from my own experience. It's
I
not theoretical. Okay, not theoretical. I had forgotten the very first chapter, the Fourier's law of heat conduction. Okay, because I was doing animal experiments. Okay, before that. So, but if you like, I totally agree that if you have the background, capacity to learn, you are committed, you are passionate, you would be a good teacher, you would learn and teach. That's the only good teaching there is, by learning.
Yeah, I think like even means most of the professors, even before going to class, they revise their notes or whatever they are supposed to teach. So this is like I think with majority of the professors. Yeah, it's. I hope we have a change in coming years, but in the same direction, like talking about recruitments and all. Like recently, the entrance for engineering and prelim and medical prelims, they changed quite drastically. Like decade back, there used to be different exams, like two times, and different for central, state, all, and now it's one exam, and it's fantastic. And my thought was like, shall we have a similar kind of system also for recruitments in NITs and IITs to reduce the human emotional error behind it? Which is, like when a person works so hard, like having PhD, postdoc, research, and like fully dedicated life, and when people face this human emotional error or lack of scientific temperament in recruitments, it's disheartening, and it's come. I personally feel really bad about it. So have you ever thought like there should be a change in the policy?
Yeah, you're talking about recruitment in universities, R&D labs, etc. See, there
I'm
are
saying
two aspects. Yeah.
unification of all the systems, like as they have done for like, for example, for medical universities. So for state and central all together, like NITs, IITs all connected. Just like,
But are
and
you talking about recruitment for faculty level or student level?
I'm saying like the faculty level can also get an example from the student level.
Yeah. No, no. I think there are two aspects to this problem. I tell you, there are pros and cons of both of these approaches.
Yeah.
So while you said is one aspect of this problem, and what you are saying because of the fact, as you pointed out, that there could be biases inherent in selection, there could be individual concerns which are not entirely scientific, and so on. That is a weakness. I totally agree with that. However, at the same time, when you recruit scientists, when you recruit at that particular level, it is not quite like buying aloo tomato. It's more like, I hope, is like picking up a gem. Now, what that means is that it also requires an individual approach, but individual approach which is indeed devoid of what you may call human weaknesses. See, even in a large scale system, when it is what is called objective system, which is exams and so on, right? Well, I mean, you see that it is indifferent. Okay, it does not test people for their strengths. Okay, there is a basically a baseline, so to say. Huh? In fact, I'm very sure that if I were to take that kind of exam, I would not qualify. In fact, let me tell you, there was this like a PhD qualification. When you qualify to do PhD, there's an internal exam in the department which
Yeah.
says, okay, you've done these courses and now you can do your thesis and stuff. So I so well recall in this committee, they asked me, they said, have you done this thermodynamics, this advanced some number? I said, I haven't done it. They said, you have to do it. I said, I will not do it. They said, why would you not do it? I said, because I know thermodynamics that I need to know. Either way. So, but anyway, because they were, senior professor, wise people, I was merely a PhD aspirant. So I said, what happens if we ask you, we force you to do it? I said, then I will resign and drop out of PhD program. That's what convinced them that they can't force me to do it. Okay. So you see, there are two aspects, there are two extremes in life. Everything has got two extremes: total subjectivity and total objectivity. Sometimes we argue on one extreme that this is desirable. Actually, what is desirable is that we be objective in our subjective choosings. Okay, so what that basically means is that what we need to get rid of is that people's biases. Okay, but at the same time, if I want a scientist in a particular area, I cannot take them by having a written exam. Next day you will see coaching classes for faculty members. Can you believe that? I mean, there would be such a bad thing to happen,
Actually,
right? We
no,
are trying to get away from that,
my
the
idea was
culture of
different
exams.
behind that
But
actually.
but I've totally understood what you said. Okay, I'm
I'm
just
saying
presenting the
that
counter view.
a joint selection, like there should be a certain committee and there should, like all applicants should go there. Then the university say, I want people in this areas. So it should be like that. But
No,
nowadays,
but that's how it is done on paper, by the way. So there is a committee. Every department has a committee, which is for recruitment. All the applications come to this committee. Okay, then they say, okay, which ones we want to interview and so on. And then actually, it is, at least I know in IITs, that's how recruitment is done. Universities, I am less familiar with that system,
here
but I'll have to look into it.
here what I want to say that, but still, like this is going on like different for different IITs. So it can be combined, and I think that would also make a difference in this.
Yes, okay. I mean, yeah, that is something one can think about. However, even there, the same problem is, you see, sometimes one department needs person in that area and not necessarily area ABC, but XYZ and so on. And then every department has so-called different standards. I know, for example, that people who may not be selected in IIT A may be taken in IIT C, right? So people, there is subjectivity in who they people choose. There is that, but anyway, all the applicants to that particular place, they go through the same committee. uh, so there is some subjectivity, there is some objectivity, and I'm not saying that this is a perfect system. It is not. And there, I often hear people I know that, is this very transparent? Is this very objectively done? Like, is it scientific temperament and so on working there? It is true that whenever we have committees of any kind, this is also true in DST, for example. You see, the whole lot of proposals are judged, and some are rejected, some are accepted by the committees. And I am sure that no committee is perfect. There are two aspects of it. One, that the committee has made a mistake. Okay, you see, so whatever the committee members know, according to their judgment, they can make a mistake, right? Second thing that happens is that it's not a mistake, but it is a calculated thing mistake. Okay, so that is much harder to live by, and I really hope that the committees become more. They are, but they become even more, can be better scientific temper. So in other words, that we, often I don't know if you have heard me say this before. I thought very deeply about scientific temper, and why is it that we all need it in day-to-day workings. So scientific temper, people often confuse it with no belief in miracles or having more degrees in science. Actually, there's no relation between scientific temper and formal education in science.
Yeah, I
It
have
is about
I
analysis, is
yeah.
about evidence, is about data, is about making a rational decision, which is devoid of my self-interest. Okay, so this is a critical part which often people do not put in when you talk about scientific temper. Having done all the analysis, maybe my analysis is perfect, but then at the end of it, I'm not going to take a decision based on that analysis, right? Because my self-interest is involved in that. So therefore, it is a good scientific analysis. Basically, scientific doesn't mean F equal to MA. It means based on evidence, data, hypothesis, theory, whatever. You do all that, but most critical part is that that analysis is to be lived. It is not for the sake of analysis we are doing. But most armchair scientists, we forget that because see, science is only a job. So at the end of the day, I'm doing science to earn my livelihood, but my life is different. Okay, so there's no connect between what I do in the lab or what I do outside of it, isn't it? So scientific temper is that which is all pervasive. And I think our committees, indeed, if they were to have greater scientific temper, there would be less number of mistakes, and there would be fewer people who are disappointed by the process, isn't it? I mean, in fact, as a lighter vein, I had proposed that all our committee members would read this story called Panch Parmeshwar of Munshi Premchand, right? This is actually about scientific temper. So this is when this person is judging somebody, even if his friend or relative or neighbor, he must be doing the right thing in judging to his capacity, which may be wrong. Okay, but at least he doesn't have a self-interest involved in it. We can make professional mistakes, right? We have seen our COVID-19 time, our scientific analysis keeps changing every 2 months, right? So it is not like that there is a final scientific analysis and everything. It's just a question that, okay, whatever that we know to the best of our ability, that one is committed to that particular thing, right? But this is not to say that people would never be disappointed, even if you had a perfect committee. So there is a flip side to it. I also get a lot of complaints which say, that because they did not get it. So there is a self-interest on both sides,
Yeah.
right? And nobody agrees, no matter the great man, but he's calling me, not giving me respect. And I would say this is not a great man. Okay, so that also happens. Now these things are fairly complex, but what I'm saying is this is life. Okay, life is nothing but complexity, right? It is never, in physics. Your background is not physics, right, Priti?
I have masters in physics.
You have, free body diagram,
Yeah.
right? It always amused me a lot and amazed me a lot. Is it what is the free body diagram when rest of the world is changing? Okay, so it basically means that you think that there is something you can isolate from this universe, and through its boundaries, you have all the forces which are well characterized,
We
right? We don't even know about my life the next moment. Okay,
all
and
have
no amount of physics will tell me whether I'm going to be alive tomorrow, right? Why? Because life is complex. Okay, it cannot be broken down into these Mickey Mouse free body diagrams because the whole world is connected. See this, everything that you are doing today, it has some consequences and implications for everything around us. And I just realized it's 1.5 hours actually.
yeah.
So now I'm so sorry that okay, if you yeah, I would now be very quick in whatever you ask me.
No, I really feel like, showers of wisdom of words, and
No, no, no,
I
there's no
feel
wisdom.
blessed.
I told you already we will have conversation. This is not an interview or I don't know what you call it, right? We
Yeah,
will have, because in this conversation,
I call it vlogs.
when I speak something, I actually learn something new myself. Okay, so some of these things you have thought about them for the first time. Okay, so it is not a product, it is a process. And anyway, so yeah, please go ahead.
So, yeah, it's like throughout, like where I am connected with you via social media platforms. So I know, or I already knew a big influencer in you. Like you have a good philosopher, and I really enjoy the way you talk about the things. And so, was there any influence in your life, a person or an incident which brought this philosopher in you, or is it PhD which brought in?
PhD.
Is
No,
which
no. I think the point is there are lots of points of influence in each our lives, right?
yeah,
So I'm learning something from you. I learn something from other people, right? If you mean, do I have a hero? I don't. Okay, maybe I was influenced when I was in second standard, second to fifth standard. I read up all of Mahabharata and many such books, 18 volume Gita Press Gorakhpur. And so there were some heroes there, as you can imagine, for a young mind. Like, for example, Shiva, really appealed to you because of his qualities of not feeling very important all the time and so on, just being your own man, so to say. Um, but I don't have a living or dead hero. Okay, and that, why and I am very amused all the time when people in, let's say, in science, we see a Nobel laureate, and a whole lot of people will, come around, and some of them want autograph, some want something, and they're always asking him questions or her questions in every possible area, right? Without realizing that just because somebody got Nobel Prize for something, it does not make him equally wise in everything,
Yeah.
right? Is not okay. Even yeah. So you see, we must have respect, not hero worship,
Okay.
right? And so the same people who do hero worship, they look at contempt to other people, right? So this is, two sides of the same coin, which means that some people we worship, some people we scold, and we think that they are not really good, right? So the more you are doing hero worship, more actually you will be scolding people also. I guarantee you that. So anyhow, influence meaning that look, so many books. There was a time in my high school I used to read one book a day. Those were the days when you actually either borrow a book or you rent it. You never had that much money, so all kind of novels and everything, including Colonel Ranjit used to be a big writer, Harold Robbins, anybody, right? So whole point is that this mind, each mind, it takes in many influences from its surroundings, from the accumulated wisdom of ages, and the people we interact with, and so on. Right? All of that is inspiration, actually. Not only that, when you watch a leaf in action, that's an inspiration. Now, let me tell you, what makes water, I mean, leaves water repellent, like lotus leaf, is one example. You
Surface.
see, we've known the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics for over a century. But what makes leaves water repellent, we know only for 20 years. Why
Yeah.
is that, I think?
Yeah, surface chemistry and the roughness of the surface.
I know, but why is it that such a useful thing and very curious thing, and based on which you can develop new technologies, water repellent paints and stuff? So many people have watched, many scientists have watched lotus leaves, but they knew quantum mechanics and they knew general theory of relativity a century ago, but not this. Why?
I think,
Okay, because we are not inspired by these things.
and
You
also
see, because,
advanced
yeah.
imaging is quite a new thing, I would say.
No, so we are very good at our lab work, and we are very good, sitting in front of computer now, and imagining things and so on. But really, what is good science? I mean, you learn from everything. So what that means is that you are inspired by many streams of both human and non-human thought.
Uh,
Okay, so which
that,
is
that is
right.
the answer, actually.
I mean, when you see a spider in motion
Yeah.
or an ant in motion, right? All of that is inspiring, actually, or just the immensity of this universe. So when we were young, we used to sleep on a terrace. Was very common, and there would be nice, cold, cool breeze in the night, especially in Rajasthan, like desert,
Yes. It
right?
was,
And what do you see? And there was not so much pollution, including light pollution and other pollution. What is it that you see when you are sleeping? You see immensity of universe.
yeah.
It's a little bit of the same kind of feeling you would get when you were alone in Himalayas, right? So you would be actually lost because you see your mind would be at rest, which means suddenly you're not thinking about yourself all the time. uh, is something very big, right, that has that influence on mind, right? So all of these are inspirations, and we cannot say, oh, okay, only certain teacher or certain somebody is my inspiration. Like I said, I have a lot of favorites in philosophy or other sectors of knowledge, so to say. a lot of interest in history, ancient history, diffusion of ideas between long distances among the countries, continuity of culture, um, archaeology, but art, for example, a lot of interest in art. So while I'm not a professional, I don't have formal education in it. I do go often to art exhibitions and try to do some myself. Okay, but this is all about keeping the mind alive. You see, it is not professional. It is not hobby also. You see, hobby is something people are bored, so they need to have something, right? Yeah, it then have. So I have not understood the meaning of hobby or this word. But anyhow, this is something you do in life and you enjoy doing it and you want to learn more about it. So these you may call influences of many different kinds. Um,
Yeah.
and these influences come more, they are more enriching when you engage with diversity. You see, so I'll just leave there by saying diversity of age, of gender, of educational backgrounds, or what have you, rural, urban, all this stuff, right? So if I were to interact with a farmer in a small village, certainly the amount of learning would be tremendous, right? Because nothing would have prepared me for that learning. Right? I may talk to 100 chemical engineers, 1,000 PhDs, right? But that perspective on life, and indeed that certain amount of wisdom, you would not get there, right? And so it is very important to respect diversity, not to worship it, okay, but and not to be influenced by it. By influence, I always take in a negative sense, by the way. So
Okay.
that's the reason I'm saying that I'm not influenced. I hope I'm not influenced, right?
Let's
So what happens is when we hear a big leader or something, somebody somewhere, they say we get influenced,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that influence is a conditioning. And that conditioning, the purpose of human brain is to break free of the shackles of conditioning, both positive and negative.
Okay, so let's say that it's inspiring, not influencing. Yeah, it is really wonderful talking with you. I know like it has been long and so actually I had planned like a rapid fire round with you like a celebrity and I'm so excited for that. And
Rapid fire mean?
so rapid fire means like I'm going to ask you questions and then you need to be just one, you need to answer in one word. Yes, no, or like that.
Okay, right.
Um, okay, I need to say this
And then
again.
for this rapid fire, what kind of gun do you use? Semi-automatic,
It's just
automatic?
my words and I have one paper. So
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Good
yeah.
experience.
Okay, so like I want to popularize science, and that is definitely going to start with scientists. And having you as the first guest is wonderful. So here we start with the rapid fire round, and my first question is like early riser or late night worker?
Late night to 12 o'clock at least.
Okay, how many hours do you sleep nowadays on average?
5.5 to 6.5 hours.
Did your sleep hours decrease with increasing work responsibilities?
Yes, they certainly have.
Okay. Any exercise routine?
Only morning, little bit of walk and breathing.
Okay. Your hobbies?
Don't have any.
Okay. I thought you would say this drawing and painting and these things which you were doing in
Yeah,
your.
yeah, but that's all. Now, like I told you, it's not a hobby.
Okay.
Uh, it is. I used to have a stamp collection until class 5. That was a hobby. Beyond that, everything is life.
Okay. Favorite food?
Um, Not anything which is heavy and saturated too much with gravy and spices. Not, I'm saying not, not,
Okay.
right?
Other,
Not that. Anything else good, right?
other party chai or coffee?
Different times, different things. Sunday coffee.
Okay. Are you satisfied with the possible family time you get with the academic career?
What time?
Are you satisfied with the possible family time, like the time you get to spend with your family, having this career now and before?
Yeah, one could have more, um, but I'm satisfied always, regardless of whether time is less or more.
Favorite book?
um, what was that book? I mean, many books as for all of us. I like one book called Mool Madhyam Karika of Nagarjuna. This is on logic of life. So it's very interesting because it's not mathematical logic, but logic of life. Mool Madhyama Karika, which is Mahayana school of Buddhism. It took me 10 years actually to read it. And that is why I like it. Most books I can, without reading, I can understand.
Okay, I should. The book you suggest for well-being for academic people,
What kind of well being do you mean?
mental well-being mainly.
You don't need to read a book for mental well being. You just have to have mental well being. Uh, you either read or you do, right? Those who read don't do.
The scientific issues we need to work on first, for example, like quality control, carbon footprint, CO2 emission, industrial waste. What?
We
This,
need to work on knowing how to work with intelligent machines, which is all the future of mankind.
wow.
Uh, yeah, every aspect of our life, what I eat, where I go, who I date, who I marry or not, everything would be controlled by the age of information and intelligent machines. What is the, you know, what is the role of human beings in 100 years from now is what we need to work on.
Perfect. The social issues we need to work on first.
In science
Yeah,
or in general?
both maybe, according to your perspective.
Well, social issue, is only there is only one. It all boils down um, to to have understanding and respect for diversity. Now, many different problems we talk about in social context actually are different manifestations of the same basic issue. And with it goes empowerment, which is to understand the role of diversity. Why do we need diversity? And therefore, if we understand that, then the empowerment goes along with it.
Okay, the last question is really fun. Will you suggest others to subscribe my channel?
What is your recommendation on this? I go with your recommendation.
Of course, I would say because I talk scientific and I don't talk nonsense, so I think people should do that.
Okay, great. So see, so people have heard this. You don't talk nonsense and you talk scientific. So I totally recommend it
Okay,
for
but
those reasons.
thank you so much for this fun and fun rapid fire round. And before that, what we talked on like a long discussion, and I found it really like a weekend activity, weekend well done for myself. I'm not sure about you, but yeah,
I wouldn't spend 2 hours if I didn't find it interesting.
okay. Um, I hope we again discuss any other time, and I would definitely like to talk about research, and I think that will also fascinate you to go back to the old days, and maybe you will share some more stories from your research and the lab days. Yeah.
Totally love to do it. Daisy, I'm also very happy that we did this. Um, that's the way to learn from each other.
Yeah,
Very
thank
good.